Welcome to Safety Net. This is the podcast where real doctors are having real conversations about healthcare, medicine, and their experiences within their careers. Thanks for joining us. In today's episode, we're going to take a deep dive into the world of corporate medicine and what it means to work within healthcare when corporations are running
So I thought we would talk about corporation and how they've impacted healthcare today and the quality of healthcare. I think we're going to talk enough about how corporations have affected us as far as what it means to work for a corporation instead of being your own entity. I was thinking maybe touch more on what it's done for actually the general population.
How it affects the delivery of healthcare?
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Sure. The biggest way that the general public feels it is most contract management groups, once they take over a contract, start billing as out of network to everybody.
That's a big one. Yeah. Especially there's a lot going through Congress right now, and a lot of representatives and senators that are up in arms, trying to gain popularity by stopping quote unquote surprise billing. But surprise billing means a lot of things to a lot of different people. So I don't think most people even know that the doctor is not working for himself, that we are working for corporations. We're working for contract management groups. And again, this is not, universal to all physicians, but this is what we know because it's what we do.
But I'd say it's now the majority, especially in our practice environment of major urban areas.
Yeah.
It's almost all. And when I started, where I purposely sought out physician-owned groups because I wanted to work for myself and have physicians as my boss.
As partners.
Yeah. And partners. And it gave you not only an actual ownership, but a sense of ownership of your shop and the way that medicine was practiced, and you had more input, and that was just important to me. And then all the places that I work now that were physician-owned groups have been taken over by contract management groups.
Yeah, that's by far the norm now. I think it's hard to find a physician-owned group now, and all the ones that are still out there need to watch out. They should be looking over their shoulder because they're getting taken over left and right. It's these groups come in and all right, just to kind of explain the process. These groups come to the hospitals, they come to the CEOs and the CFOs and say, hey, we know you have a group that staffs your internal medicine service or staffs your anesthesia needs or staffs your emergency room. Guess what? We can do it for cheaper. We're not going to, cause any trouble in the hospital. We're going to staff the hospital. We're going to come in and we're going to provide you with physicians, and you don't have to employ them, or they don't have to negotiate with you directly. You can negotiate with just us, the corporation, and we are much, much cheaper than physicians who own their own group.
I don't even think that's true. I'm sure they say that, but not only is it not cheaper, but I think what they sell on a corporate level is they talk about economies of scale. They say you have a large national hospital corporation. We have a national contract management group. We can create relationships all over the country, and in exchange for taking on your bad contracts in hospitals that lose money, we want your major metropolitan contracts as well.
Right.
The desirable ones that were physician owned because, we were doing well. And so we get swallowed up because even though we may be cheaper, as cheap, same price, have a relationship, we are local and this is national, and so it's on a larger scale, and we get swallowed up.
Yeah. So we become employees of these groups that honestly I feel like could care less about the community that they're serving.
Just what we said. It's national scale, and they're either and we've seen several contract management groups go through this on the national scale. They become publicly traded, and then they are beholden to shareholders. And we're talking about a stock price, and it will dictate the staffing of an emergency department based on a stock price or somebody hitting their bonus.
Right.
Or, as we've seen in several contract management groups, have gone from publicly traded, didn't do so well, to then bought out by venture capital firms that now own several of the major contract management groups.
So what that means, at least as I see it day to day, just some things are, like you mentioned, staffing. So somebody comes into the emergency room trying to figure out why they're waiting as long as they're waiting. Well, our hours are getting cut to make whatever budget was arbitrarily decided by this contract management group to be the most appropriate budget so that their fiscal year turns a profit, which medicine is still a business. Even if it was physician owned or these contract management groups, corporations, still a business. But I think when it was physician owned, we always put the greater good, which means the health of the community and appropriate staffing levels and the well-being of the physicians who are actually doing the work in the forefront instead of dollar signs.
So I think, yes, I absolutely agree. And when we were our own group, you staffed for the mental health, the longevity, and the job satisfaction of the physicians. We operated in a community as both members of the community and stewards of the community, so that when we were our own group, we did not do out-of-network billing because we felt it was unethical and that it would open us up to not just criticism, appropriate criticism that we weren't doing the right thing for our friends and neighbors.
Yeah, but it puts a rift between physician and patient.
Right. So we didn't do it, even though it meant less money in our pockets. But it's not just altruistic. It's because you're thinking about creating a long-term relationship with the community you're providing for. When you bring in, like we said, these economies of scale, they do not care about that. It is just a commodity to be bought and sold. And also remember that we're not talking about, when you just talk about profit and where that line is of profitability and staffing based on that, that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about breaking even. We're not talking about having a healthy profit. We're talking about venture capitalists looking for a sector of the market that has the largest year-over-year growth of any industry that's ever been in the history of man. Healthcare has been exploding as a function of the GDP for the last 50 years.
It's funny because we're not really getting more physicians out of that either.
No, and we're not making any more money. We're making less money than
much less,
our predecessors did. So the point being is this is not even about, okay, they're allowed to make a profit. We're talking about they want to see the rate of growth continue on that absurd linear curve of increase. So it's about steepening that curve. It's not even about, we need to make a profit. It's that, it's got to be these huge increases year over year.
Yeah. And so the people that we work for, the CEOs that we work for, they're taking home in the multi-millions of dollars per year. Do you know what they do?
Come into our monthly meetings from the gym with a towel on.
I don't even think they do that much. I don't know. I have no idea what these people do. I know we get letters every once in a while that was passed on through their secretaries.
They would tell you that they are generational visionaries that are just, without them, this thing would just completely fall apart.
I wonder if they even know what it means to touch a patient or listen to lungs or what we do when we sew up lacerations or reset broken bones or whatever. You name it. Their actual product is healthcare, and I don't think they understand it.
Well, I don't think they care. I think that's when you have that mentality, I could sell ice to Eskimos. The product doesn't matter.
True.
I'm going to create growth in whatever product this is. I happen to be in healthcare because healthcare is the most lucrative industry in the country. But it's just widgets, and these people are just worker bees. I think that's where, that is where we screwed up. Talking to my family members who did this, back in the 60s and 70s and 80s, what it was we as physicians made the mistake of saying, I want to concentrate on the patient. I don't want to spend my time, effort, and brain power thinking about billing, collections, business. So I'll just hire somebody to take care of that. And then
instead of them working for us,
we got myopic, and we said, I like just focusing on this. So we just let it build and build and build and build over the course of the 80s, 90s, aughts. And now it is
it's a disaster.
Cows out of the barn.
Yeah.
We are just employees. We are seen as nothing but.
You know what I find most interesting when it comes to us being corporate employees is the patients don't know that. They think that whatever their insurance company that's paying for their visit, or even if they're self-pay and they're paying for their visit, hopefully at a huge self-pay discount, they are paying directly to us. That's what they think.
Right.
And actually, it's a little bit misleading, because when they get their bills, it looks like they're being billed by me directly. It's got my name on it that is charging them. I don't see any of that money. I'm paid with some crazy algorithm that is partially hourly pay and partially a productivity bonus, but that productivity is so strange as far as how to calculate it. It's so arbitrary. They put random numbers on random values of things that I do, and that is given a set dollar amount to determine the rest of my income besides the hourly. It has absolutely nothing to do with what that patient pays. That patient is paying into a corporation, but they think they're paying me.
So I think there's two things to talk about there. The first, they keep this nebulous on purpose, right? The patient has no idea what they're going to pay, why they're going to pay it. There's no line item. You have no idea going in what it might cost. On the other end, we don't either. You could ask.
That's ridiculous.
When you come in, what is this visit going to cost me? I have no clue. And they keep that way on purpose. We don't know on our end. They don't know on their end. We don't know how we get paid. And when you ask for this to be explained to you, you get people who are no smarter than you telling you it's really complicated. Don't worry about it. And talking to you like you're a child.
Sure. I'm sure my basic arithmetic skills are enough to figure out that formula, but we're never given what it truly is.
And just like the patient, they keep it nebulous on purpose, because if you're ignorant, and it becomes easier for you to just go, okay, that paycheck seems reasonable, fine.
I've also worked for groups where I've been told by other physicians in the group, if you ask to see the books, if you ask for true accounting to find out, just keep track of where the money's going, you are probably in danger of losing your job just for the sake of asking that question.
Yeah.
It's insane.
I'm asked to see the man behind the curtain.
Yeah.
But I think on a concrete level, though, if a patient comes in, let's say with a laceration that needs a pretty decent repair, let's put in 20 stitches, maybe it's a dual layer repair, that they're probably going to get a bill somewhere in a $5,000 range.
Sure.
We're going to get somewhere between $100 and $150.
Maybe.
Out of that $5,000. And
where's the rest of the money going?
So you're saying this doctor billed me $5,000 just to put in 20 stitches. It took him maybe 45 minutes to do. That's ridiculous. But we end up getting $100 or $150 of that if we're lucky.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, remember back when we were our own group, if your friends or family members, or even, you just for some reason wanted to write off your bill. You could write your bill off, and then the patient really realized, because you're like, look, I've agreed not to take any payment for this at all. And then they get their bill and they're like, that knocked $100 off this $5,000 bill. You're like, exactly, that's all I can do. But now that we work for a contract management group, you're not even allowed to do that.
No.
You can bring your own child in and need to glue up a laceration on their chin, and they're gonna balance bill you out of network.
So a couple of years ago, I actually got pretty sick on shift. I was at work. I was doing, I can't remember if it was a 12-hour shift or a 24-hour shift somewhere. And I was not seeing a lot of patients, thankfully, but I kept seeing patients that I was seeing, even though I got pretty sick. I got myself pretty dehydrated. I think it was food poisoning. I don't know for sure. And so towards the end of my shift, when I knew there was only about half an hour left, I checked myself in to my own department. I was my own doctor and ordered my own fluids to get myself to the point where I could stand up straight and be able to drive myself home eventually. And I got a bill. I got billed to pay myself, even though the money didn't go to me.
Right.
But the bill was in my name. I was supposed to pay a ridiculous amount of money, actually, for that. And I had to fight with multiple people over the phone in who knows where, saying, I don't understand. You want me to pay this physician bill? Yes, we do. Well, I'm the physician that treated me, and they didn't get it. They was like, it doesn't matter.
No.
The money doesn't go to you anyway.
Give me my money.
Yeah.
This means a whole new meaning to physician heal thyself.
Right.
Well, I did the same thing. I fell and had a laceration on my tibial area, and I went into my own emergency department and got a stapler, and I stapled my own laceration closed, cleaned it with some betadine and saline, and put a dressing on it. And I got a $1,200 bill.
That's insane.
So we negotiated it down over the course of 6 months, and I think I ended up paying like $200. But
Yeah, there's no way the betadine and the staples cost $200.
and I put them in myself. So what we've learned, I think you and I, of course, over as long as we've known each other, is you have to do everything off book. You think that, you know what, let's just go through the proper channels and do everything. No.
Right? Follow the rules. That's what we were taught.
No. Get your own supplies. Treat your colleagues and friends off the book, because once you get into the system,
You're screwed.
yes, once they get their fingers into it, you are going to be build and build and build and build.
Yeah. So actually, I was in between jobs once when I ended up in the hospital, and I was self-pay because I was in between jobs. So my health insurance had not kicked in yet from my newest job. And because I was self-pay, the corporations that bill, so that includes the radiology group at the hospital, the actual hospital group itself, and it includes the pathology group at the hospital, because they get the money for reading the labs and interpreting the labs, even though they don't do it in real time. The emergency group at the hospital, I got billed from all of these places. But the problem was, because I was self-pay and paid a portion on my way out of the hospital, everybody thought that I was indigent care and couldn't afford to pay my bill. So nobody actually sent me a bill. They just sent me to collections. Isn't that crazy?
It can ruin your credit,
Yeah, they didn't contact me, nothing. I started getting phone calls from financial counselors asking me if I need help in finding financial aid and getting insurance and being able to pay my bills. And, I have a good paying job. I can afford an ER visit. Thankfully, not everybody can. But they just assumed, since I tried to pay for it out of my pocket, that I couldn't. Crazy.
nuts.
Yeah, and since it's all corporations, nobody ever even talks to you.
And the flip side of that, I think people don't realize the insane amount of cash pay discount that there is when you go in for a visit.
Yeah.
But it's so frustrating that
They don't let you use it if you have insurance.
right. But the price is never the price, right?
No.
So
no.
you get this astronomical bill, and you can be on that day. Look, I'll pay you 10 cents on the dollar for the price you just gave me, and give it to you cash, and they'll be like, okay, done.
They'll take it. Yeah.
And I have to tell people this all the time when they're like, oh, they want this much. And you're like, no, tell them you'll pay 10% of that, and you'll pay it now, and they will say yes.
Yep.
But why is that the state of healthcare in this country, where we are bartering like we're in?
Yeah, some third world country where you're trading chickens. Yeah, it's insane.
And they have better healthcare outcomes than we do in the U.S. anyway, in most of those quote unquote third world countries.
All right, so we talked about how the corporations have affected healthcare in terms of becoming the owners for the actual physicians providing the healthcare. What about the other corporations that have dipped their toes or feet or dove headfirst into healthcare? So we've got the pharmaceutical companies that are now playing a huge role in how healthcare is delivered and what we can and cannot do. We've got the insurance companies that are also, I think, completely out of control. So it's not just the direct patient care aspect that's being affected by corporate, let's call it corporate medicine, because that's really what it is, even though that's an ugly thing to say. But there's a lot of factors that go into corporate medicine.
It's the corporate practice of medicine.
Yep.
That we are told what drugs we can and cannot prescribe for particular things, and it's not based on what is medically necessary, what is best for the patient. It's based on what has been negotiated on, again, these economies of scale with the pharmaceutical industry to supply those drugs to the hospital.
Right? We can't get the actual medicine that we want to give to somebody because it's not on the hospital formulary because they didn't negotiate well enough with the pharmaceutical companies.
And part of that equation is also that when drugs become cheaper, the pharmaceutical companies make less of them because they are
Sure.
So drugs that we've been using for years, let's use a concrete example, Cardizem, Diltiazem, a calcium channel blocker that we use to control rate in various tachycardias, usually AFib. We now are having difficulty using or getting a hold of, even though it's been the staple for us for 20, 30 years, because it's not
as profitable
anymore.
Yeah. It's sad. It's so sad.
And that's one example. There are, I can think of 5 or 6.
Yeah, tons. But it's just that they come in, they say, we're going to stop making this because our other drug is more profitable. So you need to start carrying drug X instead of drug Y because that's what we want to sell you. So they're dictating their own demand in the market.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
You remember back when I think the first one I remember was Levaquin Cipro.
Yeah.
Cipro became cheap. I mean, fluoroquinolones are obviously overused and have a lot of side effects, but that's not the point. The point was there was a cheap fluoroquinolone, and all of a sudden they were like, that's non-formulary. You have to use Levaquin.
Right.
Even though levofloxacin was way more expensive.
Wait, and their argument, like medically, their argument was, oh, it's only once a day.
Yeah. Acyclovir, valcyclovir.
Yeah. But once a day, but how much more money are you spending on that? That's ridiculous.
But again, so they negotiated on a level, hey, we'll make Levaquin the formulary drug and take Cipro off, and now your profits just went through the roof.
For anybody non-medical listening, those are 2 antibiotics that we've routinely used to treat many different kinds of infections. Antibiotics themselves are getting just harder to come by anyway. Oh, no, that's a whole nother topic.
We'll go off into resistance.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Yes.
On another
podcast.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what about, have you noticed or do you come into any kind of day-to-day issues in regards to insurance companies? How have they affected the way you practice medicine or the way the patient gets care? And this might be a difficult question for both of us to answer because we, as emergency physicians, I honestly don't want to know whether or not somebody has insurance. I don't want that to play a factor in how they get treated. I want to treat everybody the same.
Yeah. I think that's a luxury we have, I think, in that we don't have to care whether a patient has insurance or not.
Right.
I'm gonna practice the same way because I have a mandate to take care of every patient in front of me. And I mean, I feel like we have that's a moral obligation that all physicians have, but that's not the case.
Yeah, we are legally, federally bound to see and treat everybody that comes through the doors.
So that creates its own set of problems that we'll talk about on another podcast as
Sure,
well.
yeah.
But the one thing that it does do is give us the freedom to say, I do not care whether you have insurance. I don't even want to know whether you have insurance because I'm going to do what needs to be done medically either way.
But we have colleagues who have to spend hours of their days or even multiple days writing letters, writing emails, making phone calls, getting approval for certain treatments, certain medications, certain testing, because the insurance companies, it's beneficial to them to their first reply is always going to be no. If they can get I don't want to say lazy, but if they can get a physician who is not going to put in extra effort, which honestly they should not have to put in, to advocate for their patient to get certain medications, certain treatments, then if they can deny those things, the insurance company saves money. The patient's paying a premium and not getting any benefit. And if it takes a fight for weeks, months, whatever, from the physician to the insurance companies, the patient to the insurance companies to get something approved, well, that fight didn't cost the insurance company any money, but for all of those fights, they probably have a lot of denials that people don't continue to fight and they just accept.
You remember from Fight Club when they're talking about how the corporation has an equation, A plus B equals C, that if A is the amount of money that they would have to pay out for people that were killed as a result of their seatbelt malfunction, and
Right.
B was the cost of a recall. And
Yep. As long as C was profitable, didn't matter that people died.
so the equation for them is what percentage of physicians will reach their frustration level and stop. And so they know that that's probably, that number is whatever, 30%.
Sure. It's probably a lot, I would think, because our time is so limited from patient to patient. We can't be spending days arguing with insurance companies.
So even if they give in after the third time, the point is that making them go through those 3 times, they have weeded out 30% of people who just gave up. And I think there was a lawsuit when I was a college student. I was shadowing a physician, and they talked about Prudential got sued because an internal memo leaked that said that they were going to do first pass denial on all claims because they
Crazy,
knew that
yeah.
there was a 30 to 50% drop in people who wouldn't refile.
Yeah, we know they're doing
Yeah.
this. It's not, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out why they're doing it.
And then
But
we've
it's
had
just crazy.
in our job, we've had the experience to just, not in the too distant past, cutting the reimbursement to emergency physicians from
Yeah.
specific insurance companies just because what are you going to do? Because everything's a negotiation. We're cutting your reimbursement. What are you going to do about it? And then it becomes a huge negotiation again on a national scale.
Yeah. Well, and even, all right, so sticking along the lines of insurance companies, this actually we do see this affects us. We are in a world where there are health systems that insure their own patients and say whether or not you can go to hospital A versus hospital B. And so we get people that come to us for emergent treatment, but then when it comes time to continue their care in the hospital,
Need to be transferred.
well, we have to worry that their hospital stay is going to get denied if they just stay at that hospital. So instead, they accrue a large transfer bill from a private, medical transport company, just to get to another hospital that says we want you in our system because honestly, we want to collect the revenue from your illness.
I think the place where we run into the practical application of insurance companies on a daily basis the most is when we consult specialists, when we try to arrange follow-up.
Yeah, it's hard to do.
Because we have that in EMTALA mandate that's a good thing that we have to treat and see this patient. But then when if you're not having to bring that specialist in to deliver emergent care immediately, trying to arrange for that follow-up.
For something that's a little bit more routine or not so emergent.
Urgent, but not emergent, right? Let's
Right.
say you're trying to send somebody with a kidney stone to a urologist. They can go home, but they need to follow up,
Yeah.
or this is not going to get better. They may even need a procedure. It doesn't have to be done tonight.
Yeah, exactly. A broken arm doesn't need to be fixed right away, but the orthopedist won't necessarily follow up with that patient because of what insurance they carry.
And depending on the specialist, this is not all. Some of them are awesome, and we have great colleagues across all specialty.
Yes.
But there are some that will try to suss that out. So sometimes overtly, is this patient insured or not? Which I won't answer.
You know what? It's not
I
always.
just say I don't know.
It's not always the physician. So when the patient then the next day or that day or whatever, they call up that specialist's office, the one that we talked to that said, we want you to follow up with this person, they're going to take care of you. Well, that physician's office staff starts questioning them, asks them what insurance they have, says, oh, we don't take that. And then that's just the end of the conversation and they don't get an
Well,
appointment.
they do a wallet biopsy too. They'll be like, well,
Yeah.
we don't take your insurance, so it's $400 to walk in the door, because they know they're chasing them off that way.
Yeah.
And again, in another podcast, we'll talk about how some freestandings do that too.
Yeah.
But that's always the problem. I think one decent solution that I encountered with that in a previous job was, because the hospital was very large and people needed their privileges there, their privileges to operate were contingent on you had to see every ER patient one office visit, whether they were insured, uninsured, nothing. It was included in their ER visit.
I think that's a great rule. It's just hard to enforce.
But I mean, if you don't see the patient, if the patient comes back to the ED and they say you refuse to see them and we call the office, then it worked pretty well. The thing is, you can't make it. The thing is, you couldn't force anybody to do an intervention. Let's say they needed surgery for their broken arm. You couldn't make them have surgery, but they had to be seen at least one visit and follow up.
Yeah. And so part of that follow-up visit is always, determining what next steps are in definitive care with that specialist. And that specialist, if they, choose not to take care of that patient, should at least have the decency to point them in a direction that can.
Well, I think that becomes part of their, that's state to state, I think, but that becomes part of their obligation. If you say, you know what, I don't take your insurance, I'm not going to be able to do your surgery, you then have the responsibility to find them somewhere that will, whether that be a clinic for self-pay indigent populations or whatever. That becomes your responsibility.
But that hospital policy or bylaw, whatever you want to call it, of, hey, if you're going to be on staff here, you need to, be available for our emergency room follow-ups. The only way we know that is or is not working is when the patients come back and tell us. If they don't come back, if they're sitting at home and they couldn't get an appointment with the specialist we referred them to and don't tell anybody, we don't know it's broken.
That's true. But that's a dangerous game to play on the specialist part, to mess with your privileges to do operations. But yeah, it does happen.
All right. So to kind of round out the corporate practice of medicine talk here, is there anything good that comes from corporations dipping their feet into the healthcare pool? The only thing I can think of is I don't need to be a businessman, but we've already proven that was a bad thing historically for us. It put us in this situation that we're in now.
Well, I think we had a pretty good thing going when we were self-owned, when we were physician-owned, in that you just found the people in your group who had that interest, and they could work less clinically and work more on that side, but they were still beholden to you as your partner, as another shareholder, and they were called to account. When we had meetings of the shareholders, you'd be like, show me how this works. Don't tell me it's too complicated. Put it up on the screen and explain it to me, because I'll be able to get it. And everything was transparent. Everything was above board. It was done by your colleague who happened to be interested in doing this. And I thought that was just a way better way to do it.
Right. And in that particular type of situation, the administrators or whoever's taking care of the administrative tasks, the HR tasks, the accounting, all those people knew that they were working for the physicians instead of the other way around, the physicians working for the corporation. Now, with the corporations, it's gotten a lot more money, and we're replaceable employees.
Yeah.
So I've got nothing. I don't see any benefit to
I was
it.
trying to be, thoughtful and balanced, that there has to be some kind of thing, but then I was going through it trying to think of something that you could say positive about the state of the corporate practice of medicine and corporate management groups. And
I mean, I guess they've
Contract
got
management.
they've got deep pockets, so they can advertise for positions and they can recruit quicker and those kind of things. But I didn't see that being a problem before the corporations existed.
And it doesn't seem to work, right? The whole point is, where we work in major urban areas, it was never a problem recruiting. You have more
Right.
physicians than you could.
And honestly, if your physicians are happy and stay, you don't have to recruit as much anyway.
Yeah.
Now, since we're just an employee number, not much more, the longevity of your career has been drastically cut down. So they have to spend more money to recruit just because of that. So yeah, even the benefit that I thought was there is not really there.
Well, the theoretical benefit too was because of those economies of scale that they could take on hospital systems contracts that were losers, where the physician-owned
True.
groups would have to pull out because they can't lose money.
Right. So in certain locations where the payer mix is so bad
Yeah.
that there's no choice but to be,
Haha, at least it wasn't just me.
should have shut that off. What was I saying? So yeah, in certain situations where the payer mix is so bad that, any group that comes in there is going to be losing money. The only way for that hospital to stay open and treat that community is to have a corporation that is got a cash flow coming from someplace else and keeping that place afloat. So yeah, that's a benefit.
But it hasn't happened in practice. They just cut that contract loose because they don't want the
Yeah. So we still got nothing.
right. Or I guess they dilute out the loss, because what they'll do is, like, they make us do to a certain extent, is make your job contingent on doing 1 or 2 shifts at those locations. So then they can staff them without
Without actually having to hire up anybody
Right.
new. Yeah.
everybody's going to have to go take their spanking out there twice.
And then they get the good PR for keeping the hospital open in the lower socioeconomic places, and honestly, it's probably good as a tax write-off for them.
Right. Okay. Well, I guess maybe we sort of found one backhanded way to say that there was some benefit somewhere.
Sure, but mostly they suck.
Yes, it's bad for patients, it's bad for doctors, it's bad for everybody except for venture capital, and apparently it wasn't even good for stockholders, because the couple of contract management groups that went public did very poorly when they did.
Yep, quick drops in their stock prices.
So it's just about venture capital.
I really hope you enjoyed listening to that episode. I understand that this was somewhat of a dry topic that may only be relatable to people that work within the healthcare industry, but I promise that we will be getting into more generalized medical topics and healthcare related issues as we move forward within this series.